So today we're going to be exploring stands for fairs and festivals, and the new jewelry stand that I made, and it's a pegboard based display that has a sign that's removable, as well as a base that you probably can't see at frame that is also removable, so that I'm not constrained by the size of this board and what will fit in my car because the base is extra. And this is how I made it. Before we really dive into the actual kind of how I made this, a few things. I'm not a woodworker. I have zero expertise. I know how to use a lot of the tools, but I don't really know what I'm doing. I approach woodworking as kind of a creative problem-solving activity. Most woodworkers are almost artists or mathematicians, and they usually have a real plan. I, on the other hand, often have an idea, and I figure it out along the way. So if you're looking for a true tutorial with measurements and things like that, you're probably going to want to find another one, but this one you can use to customize. So if you want to see how I problem solved and how you can problem solve, then that's great. Let's be safe. Make sure you have proper safety, eyeglasses. If you need a respirator, maybe gloves. Safety first. So anyways, I hope that this helps. Okay, so I knew I wanted to use pegboard, and the first thing to do is to cut that to size. I had to cut them specifically to be to fit in my car, so the largest that I can accommodate in the back of my car is about 35 by 40. So that's what I cut two pieces to, because I want this to be double-sided. Since I want this to be double-sided, I need to space the two pieces apart from each other so that the accessories will be able to actually hook in behind the pegboard openings. And to do that, I'm going to use, this is just like a 1x2 board. It was kind of one of the cheaper ones. To space them, under advisement from my father, he said I should use 3 across to support it, but I decided to do 2 because everywhere that I put another one of these supports, I can't use that area, and that's going to take up valuable space. So I'm going to start with 2 and see how that goes. So first thing to do is to mark those 2 pieces and cut them. Okay, so now that I have my pegboard cut to size and I have my spacers, these are going to be kind of support, as well as it's going to allow me to attach both sides together. But I'm going to clamp these on this side, flip them over, and drill them in. And then I'll add the second one and drill it in from that side. Now that I have this all clamped on, let's flip it over and get ready to drill pilot holes first and then screw it in. Haha! There we go. Once you have both of the supports securely fastened to the one side of the pegboard, go ahead and flip it over, get your second piece of pegboard, and clamp it on. You're going to want to repeat the same process on this side of drilling pilot holes, and you want to make sure you're not going to drill straight into the screw from the other side. So I was using the pegs as guides for this, which was helpful, and I would kind of feel to figure out which one I did put it on the other side and then place it one over. That was just a learn from me moment. Make sure your sawhorses are stable. So here's the point where we see if my skipping a middle support is going to mess this all up. So, I think I'm going to go in and slide in just a few blocks along the edges to provide at least some support on the outside. I just went ahead and cut non-precise pieces from my scrap 1x2 board, trying to make the pieces at least 2 or 3 inches long each. Next, I just slid these in and got ready to screw them in place. I first drilled pilot holes in all of these, and I really should have clamped them down before screwing them in, because when I was screwing them in on one side, they did move around a bit on me, but I was able to, on the opposite side, when I screwed them in from both sides, and I did that again by offsetting where I was placing the screw based on where the alignment with the pegboard was. But that was able to hook them in place. I then went around and tightened all of my screws, so enjoy watching this little screw dance, because tightening screws isn't that fun to watch. So I've got these, and these are going to be the base. These are going to be the feet. I'm going to cut a divot here to slide these in, but I want to not have a sharp corner on the top where it's sitting, so I'm going to cut off the edges here. I decided I wanted the corners to start about 5 inches from the edge, so I went ahead and measured from the edge and marked 5 inches in on either side. Then I set my chop saw to a 45-degree angle and went ahead and lined up the edge and cut off all 4 edges. I didn't know it yet, but later that 45-degree angle was going to save me, and I was going to have nice scraps. So once I had the general shape of the base, I needed to cut the divot, so I did that by measuring the center and measuring around the thickness of the part I'm going to slide in, giving myself the leeway of the saw blade, so I went on slightly the smaller side of what I had measured, just to make sure that I would need to take more off rather than have them too loose and therefore kind of floppy. I want them to be pretty tight in there. I've made another one of these, and my plan at this point was to go ahead and cut this notch and then cut the notch into the top part so that they kind of interlock with each other. I'm also not entirely sure how to move the saw blade here to get it in, because it did not seem to want to do that, so I just was able to pull it off. I like that. It actually came off pretty clean too. And then the rest of this is just kind of test fitting to see if it works, taking off some more areas, cleaning up areas. I actually hadn't used the jigsaw in probably 2 years, so in general, I was pretty pleased with how straight I was able to cut the lines. I thought that they were going to be pretty wobbly, and that was kind of a risky move on my part. But it all worked out pretty good. So once I had my cleanup done on this one and everything fit nicely, all I had to do was repeat it on the other side. In order to make sure that it matched, I cheated and I actually clamped the one I'd already sawed to the bottom one, and then just used that as a guide, and so that I could see if they fit both at the same time. It worked pretty good. Okay, next you get to enjoy watching me realize that my plan of these notches with no side supports and just the potential notch within the body of the jewelry display is probably not going to work. Even if the secondary notch on the top stabilized the rocking back and forth, without having the bases kind of stand on their own, if I ever have to do this by myself when I'm setting up, it's going to be frustrating. So, anyways, I had to come up with a plan B. Again, double disclaimer, I am not a woodworker. You don't need to tell me all the things I'm doing wrong. I already know. I am just doing some creative problem solving with the tools I have on hand, as well as the knowledge and skills I have. So basically, I drilled pilot holes and screwed it on, and then at this point realized I would have to add up the other side, and that it wasn't laying completely flat because of the angle I screwed that bottom screw in. So I was going to have to take that out and drill kind of like a recess. There's a term for it, but I can't think of what it is, with a larger drill bit that I have, so that the screw head would not kind of impact how flat my wood was laying on the ground. See, when I test it here again, it does lay flatter, but it's still not super stable, so I'm going to have to add the second side. I attached the base to the table in order to give myself the best chance of making this straight and flat, since I now have a protrusion from the other side. And I went ahead and just did the same thing I did on that side to make this side have a little stand too. Once I was done, it actually stood up on its own, so that's good news. Now I just need to do that all over again. Once I had two, it was time for a test fit, so I went ahead and grabbed the body, and it went in pretty easily once I got it lined up. And then my original plan for my sign was to kind of make a big wooden insert for the top, and it stayed in there and it worked, but man, it made it top heavy, and I was really worried about high wind and that becoming a problem, or if I was on uneven ground. So I decided to go to another plan. Okay, so I think I'm just too worried about that extra weight. That piece is super heavy. So what I think I'm gonna do, I'm going to cut this to size so that it can slide in, and then I'm going to drill holes. I've got dowels that I'm going to stick in there, and then I'm going to glue them in, and then I'm going to paint my logo on canvas that will wrap around and be stitched there, and that's lighter weight. So I did just that. I started by testing some different drill bit sizes to see which ones would hold the dowels I had cut to size, and found the right drill bit size for that. And then I went ahead and I had cut the piece that I needed to the size I wanted, drilled both holes, glued them in, and let them sit. I did a little bit of sand-up cleaning just to make sure there weren't any sharp edges. This doesn't need to be perfect because it's going to get banged up a lot in transport, but I don't want splinters. You may have noticed that my spray paint can is huge, so at this point my neighbor Brandon decided to come over because he wanted to witness this giant spray paint can in use. As you can tell from our reactions, this was incredible. How much of a spray you got from one finger push. I've cut some of this out, but in general, this took me maybe 2 minutes, and that was even with switching spray painters so that Brandon could experience the mega power of mega spray paint. Just in case you want to experience mega spray paint for yourself, I purchased this from Lowe's because I thought it was comically large and funny. It was about $9. It's Rust-Oleum. It's 2 spray cans worth, and it has turbo for 2 times faster. 4 times faster! Misread that. It was 4 times faster, and worth it. So the next thing to do was to start working on my actual signage that I was going to put in there. I always have some canvas, kind of loose canvas on hand, because sometimes I like to paint on it. So I cut that to size and then laid it out on a work surface where I prepared to paint my logo on it. I did this by actually printing out my logo in a bunch of different pages at the size I wanted it to be. I pieced it together, and then because I think I could do a fairly decent job of copying this, but it wouldn't be perfect, especially with the letters. So in order to make it perfect, I'm going to kind of use a photo reference trick that I've learned over the years, where you use charcoal or something like that on the back of the reference image and then actually trace it on, and then I painted it. It took quite a while, but I think it actually turned out really good. The next step is for me to fit this on here. So I went ahead and stitched the bottom because it did have frayed edges. Thankfully the top part of it has been treated, so it's not going to fray. But I'm going to lay it across here, center it, and then I'm going to have them wrap around so that I can slide it on, and I'm going to sew the sides. But first I'm going to pin it, so I just need to kind of make sure that I actually have it nice and ready. Let's get to sewing. After my test pin, I could tell that the top was just too loose, so I had to do a little adjusting just to make sure that I wasn't, sewing, doing something, spending a lot of time that also is slightly more permanent. So I tightened it up on both sides on the top, the bottom was nice and tight, and then I went ahead and started actually sewing the thing. Once it was all sewed, it was time for the moment of truth to see if it would all work, and it did, thank goodness. All I had left to do was to cut off the excess fabric and then go ahead and put my entire display back together. Hooray! It's finally finished! Overall, I'm really happy with how this turned out. It was super easy to put together by myself, like as if when I go to set up at fairs and festivals, and it's really versatile. This project took me about a day, a full 8 hours to make, and I think it ended up costing me approximately $70 with all the supplies, including the hooks I used. So, I hope this helps. Thank you so much for watching. If you'd like to see more videos like this or not like this, because I do a lot of different things, then please subscribe.